Time 6. It's almost 7. My goodness. Good morning. And time check 7 a.m. Time has really flown by this morning, which means I slept well, thankfully. But we are up and getting the run or the walks or the steps as we do every day. So it's another day to get in 10,000 steps. Today is a very, very quiet morning. I don't know if it's because of the time that I woke up, but I'm headed towards my usual spot to do my laps. But I realized that the streets are awfully quiet. I don't know what's happening. Maybe everybody has left their homes, but usually, there are a couple of people going and coming. The cars are moving and all that, but this morning the street is awfully quiet. I must confess that these days the weather has been absolutely fantastic. It's like Ghana is experiencing its own version of winter. Chilly in the early mornings at dawn, but nonetheless very cool during the day as well. And generally not so hot as it was a couple of months before. And I'm absolutely loving this weather, man. It's like, it's just perfect. It doesn't choke the stress out of you. There's this heat that comes in Ghana at a certain point in time that it just adds to the everyday stress. It's like you're out there, hustling, trying to do one or two and, make ends meet and stuff. Plus, very hot weather that just, messes you up. Upon reflection, I think that Tema has been one of the communities that has been very, very privileged and fortunate over the last couple of years. I mean, when you look at most communities in Tema, like 70 to 80%, the roads are tarred, properly demarcated, and most of the buildings are structured. So it's like some form of properly planned community. Not all, but most, the very popular communities that you may be aware of. And I just sometimes wish that most communities or all communities in Ghana were like that, because you cannot put a price on proper planning or proper community planning. I remember when I was a kid, and when I was in senior high school or secondary school, when they used to call it back then. Look, every time I make this throwbacks, like I do a bit of reminiscence or remembering, I suddenly feel so old. Anyway, I remember when I was in SS, senior secondary school, I remember that the first year, when first years arrive, there's this harassing by seniors, heckling, bullying and all sort of stuff. But one of the things they would quickly ask you, especially if you went to the school that I went to Kufadia Sectech in the Eastern region. So Mary Mama, shout outs to anybody who went to Sectech. So if the first thing the seniors would ask you is, where are you coming from? Like, where do you stay? And one of the things that ached a lot of the seniors was if you told them you were from Tema. Hey! Tema, bad boy, dada B, Tema, dada B, and they would go wild on you because they thought, if you're from Tema, you're from some dada B neighborhood, and you had all the luxury of living or whatever. But in a certain sense, they were not far from right, because I stayed most of my childhood in Sakmono, and it was not like that a bee. So Sakmono back in the day was one of the estates that in its glory days was, one of those nice estates. The place looked good. I mean, it was planned well. There were flats. It was a decent place to live. And so whenever anybody heard you lived in Sakmono, and also I think because at a certain point in time, the MPs, the member of parliament, the legislators used to live there. And so obviously the assumption is that you had a ton of money. You were related to an MP, or your father was an MP or something like that, so you had a ton of money. But anyway, it's just to say that a properly planned community makes for a very comfortable living. Like how I'm able to come out and go for a walk in the mornings like this, I'm not sure it's pretty nice in other areas. Neighborhoods, communities, places of living are very, very powerful units of, what make a people or the culture of a people. Because your neighborhood also it also informs who you are. It adds to who you are in a certain sense. And growing up in Sakmono is one of the things that I cherish the most. I mean, when I look back, I think it was a very good community. It created an environment of cordial living, fostering friendships and, knowing people and living a certain way of life. I'm not referring to affluence, but a sort of peaceable form of life, because the place was relatively calm. It was an easy place to live. It was a place that brought everybody together. And even till today, I haven't strayed so far away from Sakmono. I am just in the enclave, I'm just in the surrounding communities around, and I just love the place. But growing up, there was this famous restaurant in Sakmono that everybody knows about. It's called Friday's Restaurant. Now this place pours and oozes a lot of memories for people my age around that time. If you ever lived in Sakmono, it was an iconic landmark and a place, that brought about a lot of experiences for individuals. Even till today, it's still running. The place is still running. The restaurant is still going on, serving food, and a whole lot more. Now, two things. I'm going to say two things. So the first is that when Friday's Restaurant set up, I remember the night they launched. In the flats, we had porches, so you could sit in your porch and have an overview of most of the community and see what was going on. Where I used to live, we're very privileged we're lucky that where our porch faced, we faced Friday's Restaurant. And so you could see what was going around the restaurant, almost what was going on inside the restaurant. And so the night lunch, I remember, we're sitting on our porch in the evening, they were playing live band music, and it was so many years ago. I think it was 95, 96, I'm not quite sure. But we're sitting on our porch, and I remember us listening to the music coming from Fridays and tons of people moving in and out of the place. And I quite remember my dad came home, and then he quickly grabbed my mom, and then they went out. And I was like, hey, what's going on? Where are these guys going? But apparently, as a welcome treat, Fridays was, I think, giving free drinks for their first customers, the first few people who would enter the restaurant as they launched. And my mom and my dad went, and I think they got their free drinks or whatever, and then they came back. But it was such a memorable event that happened at that time. And fast forward, you know, the way Friday's restaurant is shaped, it's on a big expanse of land. So there was another space in the building where the owners created a game center for kids to come and play video games. My goodness. So that was my first touch points with games like, you know, James Bond, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, you know, a couple of these games, arcade games back then. And you know how it was with the boys. You would find us almost all the time over there, spending hours and hours playing the video games, trying to master the games. And I remember for, you know, the Mortal Kombat games, a lot of the guys would practice so much to the point that they would write the moves on pieces of paper. Those were the days of down, X, back, X, Y, X, Z. Oh my God, it was just crazy. And you know, after every game, Mortal Kombat, they would say, finish him, you know, and you have to do the brutality move. And so you do down, back, X, Y. And there was this kid, my goodness, I think his name was Oko or something. That boy was like, he just came to humiliate people, you know. He would beat the living daylights out of you. And to top it off, he had the moves memorized. They were etched in his brain. And so he would press down, Y, X, Y, but oh goodness. I think that one day after school, I went there. You know, I remember that I was given some lunch money, but I was supposed to bring back change. But after school, my dad wasn't at home, so I quickly changed and I headed straight to the game center. Charlie. So I spent the whole afternoon there. And when I was coming back, my God, it was like 6:30 p.m. It was almost 7 p.m. And the change that I was supposed to bring back to my dad, I'd blown it at the game center. You know, you pay before you you play. It's pay per play. So I'd blown the money there playing Mortal Kombat or something, Charlie. And when I was coming back, I was so scared. I was wondering what my dad would do. But I got home. Luckily for me, nothing happened. And you know, I went to bed. So I dressed up the following day and I told them, you know, I was ready for school. My dad said, aha. And when I said, which means that, you know, that you still have the change from yesterday, right? I was like, all right, then use it. Gosh. I knew what was hunger that day. I really paid for my sins. Oh my goodness. Now this second story I'm about to tell is highly classified files, but I'm going to leak it today about my neighborhood. So the restaurant on Fridays had, you know, the kebab section, but something special was going on in the kebab section of Friday's restaurant. Okay, so when they brought in the fresh goat that they were going to use for the kebab, you know, the butchers or the kebab guys would cut off most of the meat of it for the kebab, obviously, and it would be left with the bones, the parts that they couldn't use for the kebab. Now, this part was like an illegal drug that was being sold. I swear to you. These bones and these parts that couldn't be used for the kebab formed part of some sort of like, almost like an illegal or an illicit drug trade or something else. Look, I'm not even kidding. So people would come and place orders for the bones and the parts to go and make soup. You know, the bones had some tiny amounts of meat on it, but you know, in a typical Ghanaian home, there is no proper soup without meat and bones. The meat we ate, yes, but everybody loved the bones as well because you would suck I made a slurping sound. Oh my God. You would suck the bones, you would crack it, open and all sort of stuff. So the bones formed as much part of the delicacy as the entire meat of the goat. So there was a trade of selling bones at a fried dish restaurant as a byproduct of the kebab. So look, it was the competition to get the bones was fierce, man. Those who knew kept the information to themselves. And we happened to find out also. So we joined in on this trade. And there are times that you would go and they'll tell you, Asan, what? Asan says it's finished. Look, it would amaze you and shock you that the MPs that we stayed with, because in our flats, the MPs stayed there. We thought that the MPs could afford. We were not MPs, but we thought the MPs could afford real goat meat. But it happens that the MPs were in this competition with, the commoners together. You'd go and they'll tell you, oh, Alaji so and so has bought all the bones. Goodness. So that would be so heartbreaking. And there was this one butcher or kebab guy called 1111. And those in Sakumono know. If you're in Sakumo, you grew up in Sakumono, you lived around Fridays, you would know 1111. 1111 was your guy. He would sort you out if you knew him. My father, the connection man, my father knew lots of people. He knew everybody. I think one of his specialities was forming relationship with people. So, he had that deep level with 1111. So, look, let's whoever come and order all the bones. 1111 will sort my father out some way, somehow. It was just looking back at me, it was just hilarious, but it just forms part of what our community was back then and what growing up used to be like. Now, if you look at my pedometer app, you realize that on Tuesday, the steps stopped at 8,393. It was because my phone died, and so the phone couldn't count the steps again. So that's where it died. And on Monday, it rained, so the boy didn't come out. But you can see for Friday, Saturday, man, I was out, man. The weather is changing fairly quickly. As you can see, the video is getting dark. I'm very sure it might rain. But let me know in the comment section where you grew up. Let me know which neighborhood you rep. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.